good evening to each one of you who's listening with prayer meeting tonight, and for those listening online later. It may not be good evening, it may be good day, it may be good night. I don't know what it's going to be, but we're glad that you can be with us. We're trying to learn how to be a better equipped church, to know how to witness better, how we go about taking our Bible and studying with people. And this is our 15th session, and last week we were talking about some methods of teaching, and tonight we're going to continue talking about some methods of teaching tonight. And the first thing is a rather simple kind of thing, but really maybe is more important than we might tend to give it credit for, and that is simply introducing the subject. How do we introduce the subject? And if you want to finish properly, you need to start properly. I remember years ago I was going to co-porter school at somewhere in the Columbia Union. I don't remember where it was now, but we all went to maybe Frederick, Maryland or somewhere, and we were taking a whole bunch of co-porter training, me and several other guys. And Elder Rodney Davis from West Virginia was talking about how to close a cell, how to finish the cell. He said the most important thing about finishing the cell is starting the cell right. You've got to start right to finish right. And that really is true in about anything you do. You know, if you want to make a building, if you want the finishing of a building to be right, you have to prepare the foundation, everything else right first. So the way to introduce your subject can greatly determine how you do this, how the subject will be received. For example, we could say, this evening we shall study Daniel 2. Our first text is Daniel 2:1. Now I'm sure when you hear that kind of an introduction, you get really excited. That just probably revs up your engine, you know, you're ready to go. We're going to study Daniel 2 tonight. Well, okay, you know, and you can say that, and that might just very well be true. However, if we put a little thought into it, we might say something like this. For instance, we might even have a prospectus with a picture in it or an image on our tablet or a computer of the image of Daniel 2, and we could say something like this. You know, friends, God has a plan, and his plan never miscarries. And today, tonight, this evening, whatever, we're going to study the revealing of God's great plan for the world and how it's being fulfilled right now in our day. The book of Daniel has told us the story of how an ancient pagan king was used of God to tell the future. Let's open our Bibles to Daniel 2:1. You see the difference in that? That makes the people interested in what we're doing. It gives them a desire to want to hear what this study is about. Hey, this is something that happened a long time ago with an ancient pagan king that God used in a special way, but it's relevant to us right now. It's being fulfilled right now in our time. And so just introducing the subject, whatever it may be, if you can do it in a way that makes the topic relevant to the people, it will be a blessing to them. You know, in Ecclesiastes chapter 12 and verse 10, Ecclesiastes chapter 12 and verse 10, it says, the preacher sought to find out acceptable words, and that which was written was upright, even words of truth. Now I want you to remember this particular verse, because this verse has come back to haunt me tonight, and I won't give you all the details why, but this is an important verse. We have to use acceptable words. We need to search. The preacher sought. He looked for good words. He just didn't speak, and it just came out. Now, sometimes when we're announcing a text, and I've discussed this with you before, but when we're announcing a text, we need to do it in such a way that it helps the people to be able to find the biblical text. Most of the time, when we are studying with people, we will find that they really don't know their Bibles well. They probably don't know their Bible any more than they just know the hymn book. In fact, they probably don't know it as well, some people. But people in searching and studying the Bible, they need to be able to find out if a text is in the middle of the Bible, the beginning of the Bible, the end of the Bible. But we can explain how this goes. I mean, we state the book, chapter, and verse. And you can do this slow enough so that people can find it. If you just say, we're going to Ezekiel 20:18, that's three things they got to remember real quick. So we're going to go to the book of Ezekiel. And they're turning to the book of Ezekiel. When you see they get nearer at Ezekiel, you say, now we're going to chapter 18. Get to chapter 18 now, verse 23. And then you say it again. We're in Ezekiel chapter 18 and verse 23. 3. You can explain where the books of the Bible are or use cues such as, we might say, Exodus is the second book of the Bible. It comes right after Genesis. If you have a text in Isaiah, you can say Isaiah is just a little past the halfway point of your Bible, or Isaiah is just a few books past the book of Psalms. We know that Psalms, for instance, isn't about the middle of the Bible, and Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon are fairly short books that come after it, and so it doesn't take long if you can find Psalms to turn over to Isaiah. Someone might be looking to go to a text in Malachi. Well, this is the last book of the Old Testament. If you can find the New Testament where it begins, where you see those red letters, on the text for the words of Jesus, if it's a Bible, it's a red letter edition, then you just go back until you get past those and you're at Malachi, for example. That's just some examples. We've discussed some of that before. In Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 15, he says, "But speaking the truth in love, may grow up unto him in all things, which is the head, even Christ." We are told to speak the truth in love. As we share the text, as we read the text, as we share the truth, we do it in love. We're not here to try to win an argument with people. We're not here to try to club the Bible over their head with a doctrine or a teaching, but we're here to present Jesus Christ and him crucified to the people, and we speak it in love. We don't come down in a harsh way, in a critical way. We're just trying to help people to see the truth. In Colossians chapter 4 and verses 5 and 6, he says, "Walk in wisdom toward them that are without, redeeming the time." So he says, walk in wisdom toward them that are without, the people that we need to share with. And then he says, let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that ye may know how ye ought to answer every man. So we try to season our speech with grace and salt. Salt is a preserving agent, and especially in biblical times. And so God wants us to use gracious words, words that are seasoned with salt. And then one of the most important parts about speaking is sometimes not speaking. Sometimes just listening. He says in James 1:19, "Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath." And so there's some pretty important words for us. Sometimes we need, in sharing a study, to listen. People may bring up questions, they may bring up arguments, they may bring up something that you've never thought of before, and you think, well, that person, they don't know the Bible, they can't possibly be right, they need to listen to me. Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe they've learned something. Maybe God's Spirit has impressed them with something, and you need to sometimes just be quiet and be slow to speak yourself and listen carefully. Now I want to talk just for a few minutes about distinct articulation. I remember when I was in college taking speech class to Professor Jeannie Klobuchevsky. And in the class, we talked about various modes of speech. And one mode of speech we talked about was called precise articulation. You probably can understand what I mean when I say that, precise articulation. We can try to speak so precisely sometimes that we really come across, not pleasantly. However, on the other hand, being distinct in the way we speak is important. And while we need to have distinctness so that there's clarity in what we say, it should flow and flow in such a way that it becomes, as it were, musical and methodical. Now you might say, well, Brother Allen, you're certainly not a good person to say that or to teach that, because sometimes your words are hard to understand. And you know what? You're right. Sometimes they are. Sometimes I talk too fast, and sometimes I don't pronounce certain things as well as you'd like for me to pronounce them. For the last 60 years of my life, I have been fighting against a speech impediment, a lisp that I have naturally that makes it hard for me to pronounce several phrases. But I have learned through the years and through much training to be able to avoid most of those mispronunciations. But as Elder E.E. Cleveland one time said, I only speak in one tongue, and when I start talking too fast, it becomes unknown. And I'm sure that's my case too. You don't want to speak so fast that the people become, your tongue is unintelligent and they don't understand you, but you want to speak fast enough that the people are not sitting around just waiting for you to get the next words out. It's really important that when giving a biblical study, you should pay attention, particular attention to the manner of reading and speaking distinctly. Keep in mind that to many of these people, you may be a stranger, and a stranger's voice is not always readily understood, and it should be remembered that a lot of people have hearing impairments. Some of you know Brother John Christophe Ballot from France, a pastor from France that I dearly love, and we've had at our camp meeting a few times. And because I had gotten to know Pastor Ballot and had worked with him in France a few times before he came to America, I understood his accent. I understood about 99% of everything he said. But the first year at camp meeting, a lot of people didn't understand him. His English wasn't as good, and they just didn't understand his accent. It took a while to get used to hearing him. Now, that's probably an extreme example that most of us don't have to deal with something quite that extreme. But it's true, some of us here in southern West Virginia, where I'm from here now, we have a way of speaking. And to people up north, it sounds a little strange. Maybe to the people in the Sun Belt, it has a little bit of a hickish sound to it. But we're trying our best. Maybe not while we're speaking BBC English or the Queen's English. We're trying to speak in a natural way, and yet a way that can be understood by everyone, especially people who haven't heard us before. Many times, a person will refrain from asking for a repetition of a text or statement out of courtesy to the teacher, and will therefore fail to get the full import of the study. With the study group seated around the table in a small home, it should not be difficult to speak so that each person will hear. And again, this is a point on the logistics of the study, that it's best if you can, without offending people, sit in a relatively close proximity so that you can be clearly and distinctly heard, or make sure that you know how to project your voice well. Today with COVID-19 and certain people very apprehensive of being too close, they want to keep this social distancing thing, or maybe even wearing a mask. And if you're speaking through a mask, you've got to make sure that you're speaking using your diaphragm to project your voice, that your voice just doesn't come from your throat alone. Very important. In Nehemiah chapter 8 and verse 8, we read, "So they read in the book of the law of God distinctly and gave the sense and caused them to understand the reading." So the people, as they were reading the book, it says they read distinctly. In other words, everyone could hear each word. They gave the sense. They knew how to put the emphasis in the right place. And the result was they understood the reading. What a blessing that should be for us. Now, I have a few points here from the pen of inspiration I'd like to share with you about the importance of learning to use our voices well. It says, if the voice is toned right, if it has solemnity, and is so much modulated as to be even pathetic, it will produce a much better impression, and as opposed to speaking loudly and harshly. This was the tone in which Christ taught his disciples, that tone of solemnity and modulated to be even pathetic. This was the tone in which Christ taught his disciples. He impressed them with solemnity. He spoke in a pathetic manner. But this loud hooring, what does it do? It does not give the people any more exalted views of the truth and does not impress them any more deeply. Oh, and by the way, that's taken from Testimonies for the Church, Volume 2, page 615, and paragraph 1. And then the rest of that paragraph states, "It only causes a disagreeable sensation to the hearers and wears out the vocal organs of the speaker. The tones of the voice have much to do in affecting the hearts of those that hear." Now, I want you to remember something that we noted earlier also from Ecclesiastes, and that is that we have to search out the right words. We can speak. We can know that maybe what we're saying might be misunderstood, and we can try to speak it with soft tones and try to be patient in the way we say it. But if we don't say the right thing, then we can still not achieve what we want to achieve, even though we're using a nice tone. In Testimonies to Ministers and Gospel Workers, on page 150 in paragraph 3, we are told that every word you speak, even the tones of your voice, express your interest in and sympathy for the souls that are in peril. So again, our desire is not to win an argument. Our desire is not to hammer the Sabbath truth or any particular ideology against people. Our desire is simply to help people to know what the truth as it is in Jesus is, to know that they have a Savior who loves them, and that you really care for them. You care for them more than you care about winning an argument. In Testimonies for the Church, volume 6, I've got page 380, paragraph 4 there, but I have page twice, period, abbreviated twice. I'm sorry for that mistake. But it says, the one who gives Bible readings in the congregation or in the family should be able to read with a soft musical cadence which will charm the hearers. Testimonies for the Church, volume 6, page 380, paragraph 4. Now notice it says, the one who gives the Bible readings in the congregation or family should be able to read with what? Soft musical cadence which will charm the hearers. How do you do that? How do you learn to do that? Well, we're going to come back to that in just a minute. But before that, I want to read one more thing. And this is from Counsels to Parents, Teachers, and Students, page 254.5. By earnest prayer and diligent effort, we are to obtain a fitness for speaking. Diligent effort and prayer. So how are we going to learn to speak in these melodious tones? She says, by prayer and diligent effort. This fitness includes uttering every syllable clearly, placing the force and emphasis where it belongs. Now, I know I have a problem of tending to drop my voice too much as I end a phrase or end a sentence, and I may lose that last syllable, not quite clearly or distinct, but every syllable, every word that's worth speaking, we are told is worth speaking well. By earnest prayer and diligent effort, we are to obtain a fitness for speaking. This fitness includes uttering every syllable clearly, placing the force and emphasis where it belongs. Speak slowly. Many speak rapidly, hurrying one word after another, so fast that the effect of what they say is lost. Into what you say, put the spirit and life of Christ. And so, as we were looking earlier, we noted that if we give a Bible reading, we should be able to read with soft musical cadence, which will charm the hearers. And we were saying, well, how do we do this? And here we are told by prayer and diligent effort. But now the question comes up, well, how do we do this diligent effort? What is involved in that? So I'm going to tell you something that I learned when I was younger and first starting to do the colporteur work, because I had a hard time properly saying my canvas or my sales talk. And one thing is you have to learn all the words properly. If you know you're going to be giving a Bible study, if you're going to be giving a biblical reading in a home or in a church, and you already know it's going to be this verse, this verse, this verse, you already know the 10, 15 verses, you better make sure that you know how to pronounce every word in those verses. Don't go without knowing how to pronounce the verses. Many Bibles are self-pronouncing Bibles, or they have text that's self-pronouncing, and if you can't understand how to pronounce or don't have that kind of Bible, there are so many places on the internet and Bible programs that will read the Bible to you now. You can listen to it being read and you can get the pronunciation. You can YouTube it, how to pronounce this name, and there will be someone on there that will tell you how to pronounce it. But something that I learned that helped me a lot was this counsel. And it was to take a good book like Steps to Christ or Desire of Ages and read out loud 15 to 30 minutes a day, practicing reading with an emphasis. And I did this all the time that I colported. I would take time. Of course, when I was canvassing, I would always be reading to the people from the books too, and that helped me also. But usually I was reading the same thing over and over, in a rote way. And I had it memorized. I could read it upside down. I would be showing the people the book, and I would be reading it to them upside down, using my pen as a pointer, guiding them through the words. They probably wondered, how does he read it upside down? But after a while, you can actually learn to read upside down if you do it enough. But I would take a good book like Steps to Christ or Desire of Ages, and I would find some choice passages like this one, right in the beginning of Steps to Christ. Nature and revelation alike testify of God's love. Our Father in heaven is the source of life, of wisdom, and of joy. Look at the wonderful and beautiful things of nature. Think of their marvelous adaptation to the needs and happiness not only of man, but of all living creatures. The sunshine and the rain that gladden and refresh the earth, the hills and the seas and the plains all speak to us of the Creator's love. It is God who supplies the daily needs of all his creatures. In the beautiful words of the psalmist, and then it quotes from the Psalms, but practice makes progress. Remember that, practice makes progress. Here's a beautiful passage I would always read to mothers. If I was showing the book Desire of Ages, and if I was showing it to a mother, I would always read this passage. It's from page 512. And it's speaking about I believe the widow of Nain here. And it says, Jesus knows the burden of every mother's heart. He who had a mother that struggled with poverty and privation sympathizes with every mother in her labors. He who made a long journey in order to relieve the anxious heart of a Canaanite woman will do so much for the mothers of today. He who gave back to the widow of Nain her only son, and who in his agony upon the cross remembered his own mother, is touched today by the mother's sorrow. In every grief and every need, he will give comfort and help. What a blessing such a nice reading is, not only to yourself, but when you can share something like that and you can read it in a kind way with some pathos to maybe a mother who's struggling, who has perhaps a son who's become involved in alcohol, maybe drugs, maybe he has been arrested, maybe he is incarcerated, and who knows what his future is, and that mother needs some hope. Being able to share a simple passage like this can be such a blessing to them. So our time is up tonight. That's where we're going to have to stop for tonight. But remember, we're talking about learning how to introduce our subject well, to make sure that we use some thought, try to find acceptable words for the way that we will introduce our subject, that we will use good words in speaking, that we will season our speech with salt and with grace, and that we will be a blessing to others. Now, in doing so, we also know that using the right kind of voice is so essential, and we want to make sure that we do that. But thank you for being with us tonight. Pray that God will use you through prayer and diligent effort to have the sweetest, best voice and the best way of introducing your Bible study as possible. And may God bless you lots and lots. Thank you so much for being with us.